HOA Karen kept stealing my firewood, again and again. So I swapped a few logs with hollow ones filled with a little surprise. And the moment she grabbed one, everything changed. I didn't plan for things to go this far. But what happened next shook my entire neighborhood and exposed the real face of our HOA. Now let me show you how one stolen log turned into the loudest karma my street ever heard. Welcome back to HOA Stories. I'm Jake. I live in a small quiet neighborhood in the Midwest. And my HOA loves to mess with people like it's their full-time job. If you hate HOAs, or you want to stand up to them, hit subscribe. Drop a BOOO HOA in the comments. And share this video with anyone who ever got bullied by their HOA. Now let's get into it. I never thought firewood could start a war. Not in a quiet neighborhood like mine. Not in a place where people wave at each other, pretend to be friendly, and then write complaints behind your back. My trouble started on a cold morning. I walked out to grab a few logs from a stack behind my shed. And half the pile was gone. Not messy. Not like an animal dragged it off. It looked neatly taken, like someone picked the best pieces and carried them away. At first I thought maybe a neighbor borrowed some. People around here do that, even when they shouldn't. So I let it go. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to look paranoid. A few days later, more wood was gone. Same clean marks, same empty spaces. This time I felt that little burn in my chest, the one you get when you know someone is playing you for a fool. I checked my security camera, and that is when I saw her. Karen, the HOA's loudest mouth, and somehow the loudest whisperer at the same time. Short brown hair, stiff walk, bright jacket that made her look like a walking warning sign. She marched straight to my woodpile, looked around like she owned the place, picked up 3 logs, and carried them off like she was grocery shopping. She didn't even hurry. She didn't even hide. She acted like it was her right. I watched the footage again, and each time my blood boiled a little more. Who steals firewood from someone they live next to, and then walks around telling people they care about community values? I wanted to confront her. I wanted to walk over, knock on her door, and ask why her hands were all over my logs. But the problem was simple. Karen sat on the HOA board, and she loved using her position like a shield. If I accused her, she would twist it. She would claim I was threatening a board member. She would say my woodpile violated some rule they wrote 5 minutes ago. She would fine me until I moved out. So I kept quiet. For the moment. The next week, I stacked a new pile. Bigger. Dry. Perfect for cold nights. The very next morning, half of it was gone. That was the moment something snapped inside me. Not anger. Not frustration. Something sharper. Something like a switch flipping. I realized Karen didn't want my wood. She wanted control. She wanted the satisfaction of taking something and knowing I couldn't stop her. She wanted me to feel powerless. That feeling, I refused to live with. Not in my house. Not on my land. Not under any HOA member's boots. So I came up with a plan. Not an evil plan. Not a violent plan. Just a spicy one. A plan that would give Karen exactly what she kept asking for. A surprise. I hollowed out a few logs. Carefully, quietly, filled them with a small explosive mix that would only pop outward. It wouldn't harm anyone, but it would send wood flying, and it would scare the soul right out of whoever picked it up. Call it petty, call it stupid, call it whatever you want. But where I live, a man defends what is his. Sometimes with words, sometimes with small booms. I placed those logs right on top of the pile. Perfectly aligned. Just enough to tempt her. All I had to do was wait. And she didn't make me wait long. That afternoon I heard footsteps on the gravel. Not fast footsteps. Not sneaky ones. Karen walked like she was in a parade celebrating herself. I watched from my kitchen window. Her head turned left, then right. She checked if anyone was watching. She never looked toward my window. Just like every guilty person who thinks they're smarter than everyone else. She bent down, grabbed a log. Not one of the trick ones. She tucked it under her arm. Then she reached for another. This time, she grabbed the hollow one. The one I spent hours working on. The one that was about to teach her the concept of consequences. She lifted it up, looked at it, smiled like it was better quality than her usual stolen stuff. Then she turned around, and the world popped. A loud burst shook the yard. The log shattered in her hands. Wood pieces flew in every direction. Her hair blasted upward. Her face turned black with soot in one instant. She dropped to her knees, shocked, confused, spinning like she got hit with a cartoon bomb. I swear it looked like a scene straight out of one of those old slapstick shows. The kind where everything goes wrong for the villain, but in a funny way. Except this one was real. And it happened because she pushed me again and again until I pushed back. I stepped outside, pretending to be surprised. I didn't want trouble, but I wanted to see her face. She saw me and froze. Her eyes were wide circles. Her mouth hung open. Her whole body was shaking, but not from pain, from embarrassment. She knew I knew. She knew exactly why that blast found her and no one else. Before either of us could speak, my neighbor from 2 houses down stepped outside. He saw Karen covered in soot, her hair standing like she got electrocuted, and he burst into laughter. Not a small laugh, a full-stomach laugh, the kind that echoes across a whole street. More neighbors peeked out. Some whispered. Some pulled out their phones. The HOA queen, caught stealing, caught exploding, caught red-handed. Karen didn't say a word. She just stood up, brushed her shirt, and stumbled away like a cartoon character trying to escape the scene of the crime. I walked back inside, closed my door, and smiled at the silence. For the first time, the street felt peaceful. But I knew something else was coming. Someone like Karen doesn't just take a hit like that and walk away. She plots. She schemes. She prepares revenge wrapped in policy and fake smiles. And I was right. Because the very next morning, the HOA sent me a letter. A thick one. Folded tight. Stamped with her official board signature. Claiming my firewood posed a neighborhood safety threat. And demanding I attend an emergency meeting. A meeting run by her. A meeting where she planned to flip the story. A meeting where she thought she could bury me. I looked at the letter, laughed, and grabbed my coffee. If Karen wanted a war, she should have remembered something very simple. I had not even started yet. So tell me, if you were standing in my shoes, what would be the first thing you'd do before walking into that HOA revenge meeting? She sent that letter and thought she had me trapped. She thought rules and papers could win where she could not. She thought a meeting would scare me into silence. I waited a day before answering. Not because I was scared, because I wanted the right kind of calm, the kind that looks like patience but is really planning. I started by re-watching the footage, frame by frame, looking for anything I missed. A shadow, a step, the exact moment the hollow log was taken. I printed screenshots. Not to threaten anyone, just to hold the truth in my hand. I thought truth looks better on paper than on a screen, especially in front of people who like to twist words. Next I walked the neighborhood. I needed to see faces I had not noticed before. The man from 2 houses down who laughed at the blast. He was a quiet man usually, but that day he was a hero of common sense. The old woman across the street who always knitted by her window. She had seen things too. I asked for small favors, nothing big. A signed note from the man who laughed saying he saw Karen take wood. A picture from a neighbor who had a clear side view of the pile the day before. A short message from the mail carrier who remembered seeing Karen near my shed the same week. People said yes, not because they wanted to be brave, but because they liked fairness. They liked to see someone stand up to a bully disguised as a volunteer. I also checked my own yard for mistakes, for anything the HOA could use against me. I moved one old rusting wheelbarrow away. I trimmed ivy that touched the fence. I made everything look tidy, not because I loved chores, but because I knew bullies find joy in small things. The day of the meeting came fast. I walked into the HOA hall with my folder of photos and signed notes, my heart strange calm, my hand steady. I could feel the eyes from the room searching for a story they wanted to favor. Karen sat at the head table, a smug smile nailed to her face, the perfect picture of someone who thinks power belongs to them by birth. Her friends sat around her like a small court. A man who loved to point at kids for bike helmets, a woman who measured porch lights with a tape measure in hand, people who found rules like coins on the ground. I stood up when they asked for comments. My voice felt loud to me, but small to the room. I showed the screenshots, step by step, the exact minutes, the way she carried the logs. I handed the signed notes to the chair, one by one. The room quieted like a pond when someone drops a stone. Karen laughed once, a short barking laugh. She said my logs were unsafe, that I made the neighborhood dangerous, that I wanted attention. She called me reckless with a smile that wanted applause. Her words were a mask, thin and brittle. I pulled my final card slowly, a short clip of her walking away after the blast, the video that caught her face close up when the log popped. It showed her looking around, like she expected no one to see, like she believed the rules were for other people. The room shifted. People who once folded their arms now leaned forward. Even the tape measure woman looked unsure. But Karen had another trick. She had authority, and authority breeds a certain kind of truth for some people. She called security footage from a gate camera that she placed last month. She said it showed me moving items near the street at night, implying I staged things for attention. I asked to see the footage. They played it on the old projector with that humming sound that makes everything feel official. The room watched as a low-quality clip showed my silhouette moving near the wood pile late at night. Karen pointed and nodded like it proved her story. I explained calmly that I moved some logs to clean and set the safety traps the same day I hollowed them out. I said I staged nothing for sympathy. I said I made the hollow logs because I wanted to stop the theft, not to cause hurt. Her court rose like a wall of whispers. Some believed her because she owned meetings before. Some believed me because they saw my neighbor's notes and my screenshots. Then the unexpected happened. The old woman at the back who knitted all day stood up and walked to the podium. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She said she saw Karen in her yard earlier the month before, but not stealing, carrying a stack of wood wrapped in a blanket. She said she thought Karen took them for her own fireplace, until she came to reconcile and saw them back in Karen's garage with other people's marks on them. Karen's face changed for a moment, a little pale like a curtain lifting. People murmured loudly this time. The chair of the HOA tried to bring order, to steer the story back to rules and fines. But the story kept slipping away from the neat boxes of policy. I showed the photos of trash and debris behind Karen's house, little piles of wood and nails, the kind of things that make a yard unsafe. I asked a simple question. Was safety only a rule when it helped your favorite people? The room buzzed. Some people stood by me, more than I expected. But then the meeting took a dangerous turn. Karen accused me of intentionally blowing the log to create a scene and force the HOA to rally behind me. She said I wanted attention and that my behavior proved I could not be trusted with the neighborhood. Her words planted seeds of doubt. I saw them grow in the faces around me, like small weeds in a garden. Then a man in a suit who served as legal counsel for the HOA spoke up. He said the hollow logs were a liability. He said even if she stole them it was not right to set traps that could explode. Even if the blast was minor. He said the law did not care for motives. My folder felt heavy in my hands like a weight I needed to show was for a good cause. I stood and told him what the logs were filled with. A small pop, fireworks level perhaps, nothing that would kill, only scare and stain. I said I misjudged the scale but not the heart of the thing that made me do it. I apologized for any danger I might have caused, but I kept my eyes on Karen while I spoke. She did not look away this time. She looked like a trapped fox, sharp and angry. The lawyer recommended a fine for both of us, meaning both me and the HOA member who caused trouble with her words. It sounded like a compromise made to avoid more noise. I left the meeting with a fine notice in my hand and a mind full of plans. Karen left with a stiff back and a smile that tried to hide worry. Neighbors looked at me differently, some with support, some with a new kind of caution. That night I sat on my porch and watched the wood pile under the stars. I thought about the old woman who stood up, about the man who laughed, about the neighbors who came forward. I also thought about rules, how rules are good when they protect, and dangerous when they protect the wrong people. I did not want to be the kind of person who feels proud of making a mess. But I did want to be the kind of person who does not let bullies take what is theirs. I started drafting a plan that was smarter than hollow logs, something that would not break laws or bring more fines, something that would expose the truth without blowing anyone up. I remembered a conversation with the mail carrier about a shed door that always creaked open when someone left with a load of wood. I thought about small cameras hidden in plain sight, not to invade privacy, but to catch theft in the act. I pictured a meeting where the truth could not be argued with because the video would not lie. I wanted a way to show everyone the pattern, the habit, the theft, without sounding like a complainer. Tomorrow I would begin building that evidence, quietly, legally, clean and sharp like the truth itself. But before I began, I want to know what you would do from here. Would you keep building a case, or try a public confrontation to shame them into change? Which path would force the HOA to fix rotten leaders instead of hiding them under rules? I put the fine notice in a drawer and slept like someone who knows a small war is only a few moves away. The next morning I woke early. The air tasted like cold metal and coffee. I walked to the shed and stared at the woodpile the way a player studies a chessboard before the first move. I decided cameras first, small ones, hidden in plain sight, nothing illegal, nothing that peeks into windows. Only the pile and the path to the street. I knew what I wanted to catch: the hands, the face, the habit of taking what is not theirs. I bought 2 motion cameras online and a cheap recorder. I asked the young man who laughed the day of the blast to help me put them up. He came over with a ladder and a toolbox and a grin like a man who loves mischief when it is used for the right fight. We placed one camera behind a shed pointing to the pile, the other near the fence pointing at the usual path of footsteps. They were blended into the scene, a bit of rusted metal, a birdhouse, something that looked natural to the yard. I felt small relief when they clicked on and started to wait. I also started keeping a log, a notebook where I wrote dates, times, the weather, anything that seemed useful. I wrote the name of every visitor or suspicious truck I saw. I kept copies of the letter they sent, the fine notice, the screenshots from the day of the explosion. Paper builds a story in a way a screen sometimes does not. Days passed with quiet that felt like holding breath. I went about my life, work, laundry, fixing a fence post that had leaned too far after a storm. I kept the cameras running like 2 silent dogs watching the yard. Then, one late evening, just after dusk, the cameras buzzed. I checked the feed on my phone and saw a figure moving slow across the grass. It was familiar. The way they moved, the tilt of the head, that self-satisfied walk. I paused the video and zoomed in frame by frame. There she was, Karen, moving like a thief who thinks she will never be seen. The recording showed her stop at the pile. She looked around like a practiced liar. Then she reached in and grabbed 2 logs. She moved carefully, a little too slow, as if choosing exactly what she wanted. I felt a tight little grin in my chest. Evidence at last. I printed a copy and made duplicates. I burned them into a small memory stick and tucked it into an envelope labeled for the HOA secretary. I wrote a short, calm note asking for an honest review of the footage and reminding them that rules are for everyone. I did not send it that night. Instead, I walked the street, knocking on doors quietly, asking if anyone else had watched the cameras, if they had seen anything strange. More people admitted odd things: missing planters, a lawn statue that moved overnight, small items that found new homes in other yards. No one wanted trouble at first, but when they saw the video, they began to nod like people who finally feel seen. I posted a single careful message on the neighborhood group page, not explosive, not accusatory, just a request for witnesses who might have seen wood removed in the last month. I used plain language and left the rest to chance. The next day, the HOA called for another meeting. Same hall, same faces, different tension in the air. This time I did not walk in empty-handed. I brought the memory stick, the printed frames, the notes from neighbors, and a short write-up of events in simple words. Karen acted surprised the way a person practices surprise in front of a mirror. She asked if I was trying to stir trouble. She accused me of playing dirty tricks again. Her friends leaned forward like a shield ready to block truth. I asked the chair to play the footage. The room quieted like the exact moment before rain hits pavement. The screen filled with the night footage. Karen's shadow moving, her hands taking what didn't belong to her. A murmur ran through the room, a nervous sound that told me people were choosing sides inside their heads. The chair tried to call order the way a teacher calls on a class that has grown too loud. Then an unexpected voice spoke up, the mail carrier who had delivered my earlier letters. He said he had seen Karen loading wood into a pickup a week before. He mentioned a corner of the pickup bed where a distinct mark matched the log shapes my neighbor had photographed. I watched Karen's face like a hawk watches a field mouse. She went red, then white, then thinly smiling again like a cracked mask. Her lies were getting heavy, and heavy things break easier. The lawyer spoke again about liability and law and safety. He said the footage proved theft but also proved danger was created in the yard. I raised my hand and told him plainly what the hollow logs were made of and that I misjudged the amount of noise they would make. I said I apologized again for that mistake and for any fear I caused. Then I did something I had not planned a moment before. I asked the room to remember the old woman who stood up for me last meeting. I asked them to think about fairness and how rules mean nothing if the ones who enforce them are not honest. The chair hesitated. Then something shifted. A few neighbors stood and offered short statements about Karen taking wood in months past. Small stories piled up like rocks forming a path to the truth. Karen tried to counter each story with a fast word and a faster smile. But her fast words were drowned by the slow collection of facts. When the vote came, it was not decisive like a thunderclap. It was a series of small measures, a fine for my poor judgment with the logs, a reprimand for Karen for theft and deceit, a requirement that both of us attend community mediation and pay for a neighborhood safety workshop. It was not the grand victory I pictured. It was messy and imperfect and human. I left the meeting with my fine and her reprimand both in my hand. I felt tired and oddly relieved. But the most important change happened quietly over the next weeks. People started talking more openly on the group page. Someone arranged a small meeting about fairness in enforcement of rules. The HOA had a new volunteer signing up to check complaint procedures. A small thing, but a needle moving in the right direction. Karen stopped walking around like she owned the neighborhood. Her steps grew careful, measured, smaller. She still smiled in meetings, but the smile had cracks. I still had to pay a fine for making a dangerous choice. I paid it because I wanted to close that chapter and move forward with clearer plans. My next step was to help change the way things were done. I proposed a suggestion for a simple camera policy that would allow legal, visible cameras to record common areas and a transparent complaint process that required evidence before fines were issued. Some people pushed back at first. Privacy was a word they used like a shield. But when I showed them the footage and asked them to imagine a world where only rules for some people mattered, they understood. We created a small committee to rewrite the complaint process. I was on it not as a hero but as someone who had learned the hard way about limits and consequences. The neighborhood felt different by the time summer turned to early fall. Little things changed. The trash beside the fence was gone. Neighbors waved more honestly. A sense of fairness spread like a good rumor. But the war was not over. Karen still watched me sometimes from her window. Her smile was a slow burn that could flare up again when she thought the light favored her. I knew I could not rely on one good meeting to fix everything. Systems change slowly and people slower still. So I began to build something long-term. A plan that would hold when tempers cooled and memories faded. A plan that would teach the HOA how to be fair without me standing there at every meeting. I started speaking with other neighborhoods, sharing my footage and my notes, asking how they handled problems with power and favoritism. I learned small things that added up to big differences: clear complaint forms, time limits on fines, third-party mediation. By the time the first snow fell, I had a folder thicker than the one I brought to the first meeting. It felt like armor and like a promise. I have been careful since then. No hollow logs, no surprises that could hurt anyone. I learned my line, and I cross it only when truth needs a loud voice. But I still wonder about the quiet ones who let bullies rule by silence. Are they afraid, lazy, or simply tired of fighting a small war against something that looks like organization? Tell me, would you change rules to make sure no one uses them as a weapon? Or would you push for people to act with more honesty so rules are not needed so much? Winter settled slowly over the neighborhood. The kind of winter that makes wood smoke drift sideways and stick to jackets. The kind that makes every sound sharper, doors closing, dogs barking, footsteps crunching on frozen grass. I kept watching Karen from a distance. Not like a spy. More like someone who knows a storm can return even when the sky looks clear. She walked less, talked less, avoided the group chat threads about fairness. But she wasn't defeated. She was waiting. People like her never fall quietly. They pause, gather their energy, and try again when everyone else is tired. I tried to focus on the positive changes. The new complaint process moved forward slowly. The committee met every week in the small library room with dim yellow lights and wooden chairs that creaked when you leaned back. We argued sometimes. We found solutions sometimes. But at least we were talking like people who lived side by side instead of enemies on separate islands. One night after a long meeting, I walked home under a full moon. The street looked calm, peaceful. But when I reached my house, the peace broke like thin ice under a heavy boot. My shed door was open, wide open, swinging slightly in the wind. I felt a spike of heat in my chest. Not fear, anger. Anger that tasted like metal and old bitterness. I walked carefully, checking the grass, checking the path. The snow had a single line of boot prints leading from the street to the shed. Only one set. Only one person. Inside the shed, everything looked touched but not taken. My tools had been moved, not stolen. My workbench had marks where someone leaned for support. My camera equipment box was open. The cables pulled out like someone wanted to see what I owned. This wasn't theft. This was a message. I checked the cameras immediately. The back camera caught only a shadow, a figure entering the shed but staying far enough from the lens that the face stayed hidden. The front camera showed nothing. Whoever it was understood angles. I sat on the porch in the cold for a long time. Breath turning white, thoughts turning darker. I knew Karen had motivation. I knew she had anger. But I didn't want to accuse her without proof. Evidence matters, especially when the other person loves rules twisted in their favor. I checked the shed for anything missing. Only one thing stood out. A stack of printed photos from the last meeting, the ones showing Karen stealing my wood. Most of them were still there, but 5 prints were gone. 5, taken carefully, as if someone removed only the ones that threatened them the most. That night I locked the shed with a new padlock. I added another camera, higher, angled differently. I changed the batteries in the motion lights. I made the place look like a small fortress. I didn't want a fight. But I wasn't going to be caught sleeping either. The next morning the group chat was filled with a new complaint. Not against me. Against everyone. Someone claimed the neighborhood was falling apart, that people were feeling unsafe, that property values might drop if disorder continued. The message didn't have a name. But the words smelled like Karen. Whenever she wanted control, she started with panic. Fear is a rope that pulls people where she wants them to go. Later that afternoon, I went out to shovel my driveway. Snow was thick and packed from the night. As I worked, the old woman who defended me walked by with her scarf wrapped high around her face. She stopped, leaned on her cane, and whispered something that tightened my stomach. She said she heard voices behind my shed late last night. Not one voice. Two. I felt a strange shift inside me, like the ground under my feet tilted a little. 2 people means planning. 2 people means coordination. 2 people means someone else joined Karen's games. I thanked the old woman, told her I'd check the cameras again, but my mind was already running ahead. Why would Karen need help? Why now? What was she preparing? That evening I reviewed footage again with new eyes. I slowed down every frame. The shadow entering the shed wasn't tall, not wide, not obviously Karen. But the second shadow behind it moved differently. The second shadow stayed farther away like someone watching guard. Then something clicked. There was a board member who always voted with Karen. A tall man with thick gloves who liked silence more than reason. He always stood behind her in meetings, like a bodyguard with HOA paperwork. The idea that they teamed up made everything feel heavier. I knew I needed more than cameras now. I needed people. So I called a few neighbors. The man who helped me place cameras. The old woman. A young couple who complained about missing porch decorations last month. We met in my garage with a space heater humming in the corner. I showed them the footage. I showed them the missing prints. I explained the shed door situation. I told them I wasn't accusing anyone without proof, but the pattern was getting clearer. The young couple looked nervous. People like them move into quiet neighborhoods expecting peace, not HOA wars. But they agreed to watch their cameras and keep notes. The man who laughed at the explosion said he'd stay alert at night. The old woman said she had no fear of shadows and would keep her window cracked open to listen. I felt something warm inside. Not victory. Support. The kind of support that builds small armies in small towns. For the next week, nothing happened. No footprints. No missing items. No sudden drama. But that was not comfort. That was calm before a new move. The HOA announced another meeting. This one called a special review meeting. They wanted to discuss behavioral concerns and ongoing disturbances. In HOA language, that meant one thing. Someone wanted to paint me as the problem again. I walked into the meeting hall with a straight back and steady hands. Karen sat there already, her hair perfect, her smile thin. Beside her sat the tall board member with the gloves. He didn't look at me, which meant everything. The chair cleared their throat and said complaints had been submitted anonymously. They said neighbors were reporting tension, mess, cameras pointing the wrong way, a shed that was dangerously fortified. They said this behavior raised concerns about community safety. I almost laughed. The one who steals and sneaks and schemes was calling me unsafe. Classic Karen strategy. I let them talk. I let them throw their words like little stones. I didn't interrupt once. Not until they accused me of creating paranoia. Then I stood. Calm. Clear. No shaking in my voice. I asked one question. Just one. If the community was afraid, who exactly was filing the reports? Names were missing. No signatures. No dates. Just statements written in language that matched the tone of one person. Karen shifted in her seat. Her glove-wearing ally looked at the table instead of the screen. The room felt the tension, the way dogs feel thunder before humans do. I placed the memory stick on the table. The one with the new footage. The one showing the two shadows behind my shed. I didn't claim they were Karen. I didn't claim they were the board member. I just placed the stick there and said anyone could watch the recording after the meeting. The room went quiet. Quiet in a way that wasn't comfortable. More like realization settling in, heavy and slow. Then the door opened, and the mail carrier walked in with a stack of envelopes. She apologized for being late, then asked who needed the package addressed to the HOA chair. The chair opened it right there. Inside were photos, printed, sharp, taken from another neighbor's outdoor camera. Photos showing the tall board member standing near my shed with a flashlight. Photos showing Karen just a few steps behind him. The room changed. The way temperature changes when a storm hits. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just a sharp drop in pressure. Karen tried to speak, but her words tangled. The tall board member tried to explain, but explanations sounded like sand slipping through fingers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't celebrate. I simply asked the room a question. If the people claiming fear are the same people sneaking into yards, who is the real danger here? The meeting ended differently this time. No fines. No warnings for me. But Karen and her ally were placed under investigation. Their positions temporarily suspended pending review. People walked out whispering. Some shook my hand. Some stared in disbelief. Some just looked tired from seeing truth revealed so suddenly. I walked home slowly. Snow crunching under my boots. My breath warm in the cold night air. I felt justice, but not victory. Not yet. Because I knew Karen wasn't finished. She never quits until all her tools break. And she still had some left. Now I want to ask you something real. If you learned two people were sneaking into your space at night, Would you let justice play out slowly, or would you take action before they try something bigger? I walked home after that meeting with snow sticking to my boots like small reminders. Reminders that trouble doesn't melt just because someone gets caught. The air felt colder, sharper, almost waiting for something. I could feel it in the way the trees didn't move, in the way porch lights flickered, in the way the night settled too quietly. Karen and her glove-wearing ally were suspended. But suspension isn't punishment. It's waiting. And waiting is exactly where danger grows. I sat in my living room drinking hot coffee, thinking through everything again. 2 shadows behind my shed. Missing photos. Anonymous complaints. A sudden, special meeting. These weren't accidents. These were steps. Someone was building a path toward something bigger. And I had a feeling it wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up early. My breath fogged in the cold house. I walked to the window and scanned the yard out of habit. Everything looked normal. Snow untouched, shed locked, woodpile quiet. Then I noticed something off. The motion light on the fence was tilted downward, not broken, just angled so it wouldn't detect anything. Someone wanted to move without being noticed. I walked outside and checked the rest of the lights. Another one was loosened. Another one pointed away from the yard. Someone had been busy. I checked the cameras. The footage showed nothing. Someone had found the right blind spots. I felt that heavy pressure in my chest again. Not fear. Focus. The kind you get when you know the next move is close. I decided to gather everyone who supported me. Not in secret, not in some dramatic way. Just neighbors talking together. People who cared about fairness and safety. People who didn't want to see a bully rebuild her throne. We met that evening in my garage again. Same heater humming, same cold air creeping under the door. The old woman sat in her usual chair. The young couple stood near the workbench. The man who helped install cameras leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. I explained the lights, the blind spots, the feeling that someone was preparing something. They listened like people who had been burned before. The old woman cleared her throat softly. She said she heard footsteps again the night before. Not close. Not at my shed. But pacing in the alley behind my fence. Pacing like someone thinking, planning. The young couple said their trash cans had been moved. The man with the ladder said he found tire tracks near the alley that didn't match anyone on the street. Little details. Small pieces. But small pieces make big pictures when you place them right. I told them we didn't need anger. We needed clarity. Proof. Preparation. We made a plan. A patient one. Not revenge. Not traps. Just awareness. The man with the ladder would walk his dog later at night and keep an eye out. The young couple would set up a temporary driveway camera. The old woman would keep listening from her window. I would check lights and angles every morning. We agreed on one rule. No one confronts anyone alone. When people join together, fear gets smaller. Bullies hate that. They thrive on silence. We were done being silent. For 2 days everything stayed calm. A strange, fake calm. The kind of calm that makes your stomach tighten. The kind of calm that hides something behind it. On the 3rd night I heard something. A single clank. Metal hitting metal. Soft. Quiet. But enough. I walked to my window and looked out. Nothing. Just darkness and frost and my breath fogging the glass. But when I opened the door, I saw it. A small object on my porch. A piece of metal. Bent. Scratched. Fresh marks on it. It was the latch from my shed. Broken clean off. My heartbeat slowed in a strange way. Not panic. A cold, calculating beat. Someone had tried the shed again. Someone wanted something inside. Maybe the photos. Maybe evidence. Maybe to plant something. Maybe to take something to twist the story again. I picked up the latch and inspected the side. Scrape marks. Not from a tool. From a glove. A rough glove. Just like the board member wore every meeting and every time he walked outside. The puzzle was forming itself. And the centerpiece was him. The next morning I checked the shed. Nothing looked missing. Nothing looked moved. But someone had tried the lock. And tried hard. Later that day, the HOA sent another message. This one was polite. Fake polite. The kind of politeness that smells like a trap. They wanted to check my property for safety issues. They wanted to review my shed security. They wanted to inspect possible hazards. Hazards. That word again. Their favorite word when they wanted control. I responded with 3 words. Schedule it publicly. If they wanted to inspect my shed, they would do it in front of neighbors. I wasn't letting anyone step onto my land unseen. They ignored my request. They said they would stop by sometime this week, which meant they wanted surprise. And surprise always serves the one holding power. I walked to the old woman's house to update her. She opened the door slowly and gave me a worried look. She said she saw the tall board member talking to someone near his garage. Someone in a heavy coat. Someone handing him a small package. I felt that cold pressure again, like winter air inside my ribs. That night I stayed awake longer than usual. I sat by the window with the curtains cracked open. I waited, listened, watched. Around midnight I saw movement. Not in my yard. In the alley. 2 figures. One tall, one shorter. They walked slowly, whispering, pointing toward my house. I didn't grab anything. I just watched. I watched how their shadows moved, how careful they were, how they avoided the streetlights on purpose. People don't act like that unless they mean trouble. They didn't come near the shed. They didn't come near the cameras. They just studied the place like someone planning the next move in a long game. The next morning I called a few neighbors. We gathered again. I explained everything. The alley. The shadows. The shed latch. The inspection message. They didn't look shocked. They looked tired. Tired of the same faces causing chaos behind polite masks. The young couple suggested posting everything publicly. The old woman suggested speaking to the chair directly. The man with the ladder suggested waiting one more night because bullies always get sloppy when they get hungry for results. That idea made sense. People like Karen break their own patterns when they want revenge. They act faster, sloppier, more desperate. I just had to watch for it. That evening a cold front rolled in. Wind howled between the houses like something wounded. Trees bent. Branches broke. The whole neighborhood went dim for a moment as lights flickered. Around 10 p.m. I heard something. Not footsteps. Not a knock. A low scrape. Metal against wood. From the direction of the shed. I moved quietly to the back door and looked through the small window. I saw them. 2 figures. Tall and short. Hunched near the shed. The tall one held something in his hand. A tool. A crowbar maybe. The shorter figure kept looking back toward the alley like a lookout. My heart wasn't racing. It slowed. Focused. Like every instinct wanted to memorize the moment. They pried once. Twice. Harder. The latch bent. The shed shook lightly. Then, a bright light suddenly washed the yard. The young couple's driveway camera had motion floodlights. They activated at the perfect moment. The figures froze. Light hit them from the side. I saw faces. Clear enough to know. Clear enough to confirm. Clear enough to end the lies forever. It was Karen. And the tall board member. They ran. They slipped on the frozen ground. They scrambled like animals caught too close to a trap. The light followed them until they disappeared behind the neighbor's fence. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbors. Within minutes the man with the ladder arrived. The young couple came outside. The old woman watched from her window. We had everything. Faces. Actions. Intent. Footage. Witnesses. This wasn't about wood anymore. This was deeper. This was about control. Power. Fear. And a bully who couldn't stand losing her throne. Now I had to decide what to do next. Gather everyone and expose them publicly. Or confront them face to face while the truth was still burning hot. So tell me, if you caught your HOA enemies breaking in at night with proof in your hands, would you take it to the whole neighborhood, or walk up to their door and end the game right there. I didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing their faces so clearly, frozen in that floodlight, like two kids caught with stolen cookies. Except kids don't break into sheds. Kids don't twist rules. Kids don't weaponize HOAs to hide their own garbage. I sat at my kitchen table with the video paused on my phone. Karen's eyes wide. The tall board member mid-step. His crowbar glinting under the camera glare. My shed bent at the latch for the second time in 1 week. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt something colder. A steady kind of calm that comes right before someone makes a decision that changes everything. By sunrise, the neighborhood already knew something happened. Not because I told them. Because Karen and her ally acted strange. Too strange. People notice when villains lose sleep. Karen didn't start her car that morning. She stood on her porch pretending to sweep snow that wasn't there. Her ally walked around the block twice with no destination. They kept checking who was watching. Who might know? Who might talk? I drank coffee on my porch as if nothing happened. But I watched them the way a hawk watches a shaking bush. Later that afternoon, I invited a few neighbors over. Not all. Just the ones who had been part of the small circle. The people who had given support quietly and honestly. The ones who had something to lose just like me. We gathered again in my garage. The heater hummed, little clouds of warm air floating through the cold room. Everyone looked at me with the same silent question. What now? I played the new footage on the screen. No one spoke for a moment. Not shock. Recognition. This was exactly what we expected but hoped would never come. The old woman cursed softly under her breath. A word I never heard from her before. The young couple looked at each other like they weren't sure if they wanted to laugh or move to another state. The man with the ladder shook his head and said, "They're desperate. That means they're close to messing up big time." I told them the truth. I had two choices. Expose them publicly, or confront them first and let them decide how to face the neighborhood. Both options carried risk. Both options carried weight. Both options would decide the rest of this story. We talked for hours. Not yelling. Not angry. Just tired. Tired of the same faces causing storms in a place that was supposed to be peaceful. Tired of rules that protected the wrong people. Tired of pretending HOAs were run by fairness instead of fear. In the end, the old woman said something that decided everything. She said silence is what helped bullies last for years. She said Karen counted on shame, on people staying quiet, on whispers instead of truth. She said, if you talk to her alone she'll twist it. If you talk to her in public she'll run. But if you bring everyone the truth at the same time, she won't have anywhere to hide. That settled it. The truth would not be private. It would be shared where everyone could see. No backroom deals. No hallway apologies. No fake smiles hiding claws. We planned a neighborhood gathering. Not an HOA meeting. A real community meeting. In the open. In the park near the playground where no one could control the room. We scheduled it for the next evening. We invited everyone with a simple message. There is something important we need to discuss. Please come. It concerns all of us. Karen and her ally received the same message. I sent it myself. No threats. No comments. Just the invitation. The kind that forces people to show up because silence would look like guilt. That evening I prepared everything. Footage. Printed stills. A simple explanation. No drama needed. The facts were strong enough to carry themselves. Before heading to the park, I took one last walk around my yard. The snow crunched under my boots. My breath rose like steam. And the shed stood there quietly, bent latch and all. A reminder of the line they crossed. People gathered slowly. Families in winter coats. Kids with red cheeks. Neighbors holding hot coffee. Everyone waiting for something important even if they didn't know what. Karen arrived late. She walked fast with her head held higher than usual. Her ally walked behind her. Hands in his pockets. Eyes darting around like he expected an attack from the trees. I walked to the center. Cleared my throat. and spoke in simple words. Words even a child would understand. Words that didn't need anger to be powerful. I told them about the shed, about the missing prints, about the blind cameras, about the shadows in the alley, about the repeated attempts to enter my property, about the way someone did everything quietly, then tried to blame the chaos on me. Then I played the footage, and the park went silent, completely silent. You could hear the snow settling on the ground. Even the wind paused. Everyone watched. Everyone saw. Everyone understood. Karen's face drained. Her ally stared at his boots like they suddenly became interesting. People whispered. Some gasped. Some just shook their heads like they were finally seeing truth they suspected for a long time. The young couple stepped forward and said they'd seen the same two people near the alley. The old woman said she heard the same voices. The man with the ladder said he found the same footprints. One by one people shared small pieces, and all the small pieces turned into a giant wall of truth. Too tall to climb, too wide to escape, too real to deny. Karen tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but words didn't come out. Her ally tried to defend her, but his voice cracked like old wood under pressure. The HOA chair finally stepped forward. Not Karen, not the board, the chair. The one who wanted fairness but was too afraid to challenge the people who shouted louder. He said the footage was enough. He said he would call for an emergency vote. He said he would recommend removal. Permanent removal. Not suspension. Not probation. Removal from the board and all HOA authority. People clapped. Not cheering. Clapping like they were applauding a truth that was long overdue. Clapping like they finally felt free to breathe. Karen walked away fast. Her ally followed like a shadow that didn't want to exist anymore. They didn't look back. Not once. Not at me. Not at the neighbors. Not at the camera still in my hand. When the meeting ended, people came up to thank me. Not for revenge. For standing up. For not letting fear win. For choosing truth over silence. For doing what so many wished they could do but never had the push or the proof. I walked home under the streetlights that glowed soft and yellow. The air felt warmer even though the temperature hadn't changed. The neighborhood felt lighter, safer, like a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders. I sat on my porch and watched the snow fall. Slow, gentle, almost peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for shadows. I wasn't checking the yard every 5 minutes. I wasn't expecting footsteps near the shed. But one thought stayed with me. A thought that didn't let go even when the night got quiet. Karen was gone from power. But people like her don't disappear. They regroup. They return. They find new angles, new rules, new cracks to slip through. And that made me wonder something I want to ask you. If someone this petty and dangerous got kicked out of the HOA, would you let the story end here, or keep watching them in case they try one last desperate move?